Picture the Sahara Desert. You likely imagine shifting sand dunes and a landscape so hostile that finding a single drop of water feels impossible. In the 1850s, a German explorer named Heinrich Barth was crossing that exact wasteland by caravan when he stumbled across something that shouldn't exist deep within the dunes. Etched directly into the rock, Barth found elaborate paintings showing elephants, giraffes, and hippos, alongside human hunters moving through rich, open grasslands. Those animals require massive amounts of water to survive. They were painted there because the Sahara of that era was a sprawling, wet jungle. We know from sediment records that this lush ecosystem thrived for thousands of years, fed by monsoon rains that fell season after season, saturating the entire region. The physical evidence left in the rock forces us to rethink the baseline conditions of early human history. Our ancestors managed to survive in an environment that looks nothing like the desert we know today. So what exactly possesses enough raw planetary power to turn an entire desert continent into a sprawling swamp? Roughly 11,000 years ago, the Earth experienced an orbital wobble. This is a slight shift in the planet's tilt as it spins on its axis, altering how sunlight hits the surface. That tiny wobble increased the summer sunlight hitting North Africa by about 7%. The land heated up faster than the nearby ocean, acting like a giant thermal vacuum that pulled massive amounts of Atlantic moisture directly inland. Once the rain started falling, dark vegetation sprouted across the sand. Because dark plants absorb more heat than reflective desert sand, the warming ground pulled in even more moisture, creating a continuous climate feedback loop. The environment began rewriting its own weather system, drop by drop, as wet soil and new lakes pumped evaporated moisture straight back into the sky to form new storm clouds. A minor orbital quirk triggered a runaway chain reaction, terraforming a massive chunk of the African continent into a permanent water world. At the very center of this soaked continent sat a body of water that scientists now refer to as Lake Megachad. To understand the sheer scale of the rainfall, look at its size. At its peak, Lake Megachad covered roughly 8% of the entire Sahara. That is a single lake stretching the distance from New York to Chicago. Fossil records show this inland sea was deep and permanent enough to support massive populations of hippos and crocodiles for thousands of years. But living alongside millions of cubic gallons of continuous rainfall brought a different set of lethal threats for the humans in the region. In Egypt, the runoff fueled an era geologists call the Wild Nile. The river surged into a violent torrent, churning through the valley with enough force to scour the riverbanks and bury the landscape in thick sediment. The endless rain drowned valleys and destroyed low-lying camps. Early humans were forced into a brutal calculation. They had to adapt their entire way of life to the rising water, or die in it. Rather than trying to outrun a continent-wide flood, human populations stayed, observed the environment, and engineered new ways to live. They abandoned the dangerous floodplains and moved their settlements vertically. By taking refuge in natural rock shelters high above the valleys, they secured dry, naturally engineered roofs that could withstand months of heavy precipitation. From this safe high ground, they developed a lifestyle researchers call aqualithic. They ventured down to the water's edge to harvest fresh fish, and as the rock art shows, they began carefully domesticating herds of cattle across the surrounding wetlands. They also developed new technology to cross the swollen lakes. Archaeologists discovered prehistoric vessels, like the Dufuna canoe, carved specifically to navigate this submerged landscape. Human civilization endured this human period by actively building their communities, their food supply, and their tools directly around the water. The Green Sahara lasted for 10,000 years, but it didn't stay green, and the transition back to a desert was remarkably violent. As the Earth's orbit wobbled back toward its previous angle, the climate feedback loop shifted into reverse. Rainfall decreased, plants died, and the exposed, bright soil began reflecting sunlight away, which pushed the remaining rain clouds out of the region. Dust layers on the ocean floor reveal the speed of this collapse. The lakes didn't slowly recede over millions of years. The vegetation died and was buried by advancing sand dunes in as little as 1 to 2 centuries. As the land turned to dust, thousands of families abandoned the drying Sahara. They packed up generations of water survival knowledge and embarked on a mass migration eastward toward the Nile Valley. This retreat forced thousands of people into a narrow strip of fertile land along the river. To survive in such high concentrations, they had to develop communal irrigation and complex social structures to manage the remaining water. The precise agricultural and social innovations that would form the foundation of ancient Egypt. The most unsettling part of this history is that the African humid period was not a freak accident. Geological core samples prove the Sahara has flipped from bone-dry desert to sprawling jungle, and back again, up to 230 times across millions of years. The endless rain is a permanent, quiet cycle built into the mechanics of our planet. It leaves us to wonder exactly what kind of world will emerge when the Earth decides to wobble again.